So what's next in politics after Super Tuesday? Avik Roy, opinion editor at Forbes, joins me from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Avik, good to see you. It's an interesting and even more interesting race on this Wednesday after Super Tuesday. What were the big takeaways for you in the results?
Yeah, so obviously on the Republican side, it was a good day or a good night for Donald Trump, but not as good of a night as he was hoping to have 1 or 2 weeks ago. So one thing that's important to note is that there was some erosion in his support over the last week. As you'll recall, in the Houston debate, it was really the first time that Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz went after Donald Trump. And in the ensuing week at campaign events, they both kept up the pressure, ran a lot of ads against Trump. So this is the first set of results that we've had after a concerted attack against Trump. And there was some effects. We saw that Ted Cruz won 3 states and Marco Rubio won. So while Trump did the best, it was far from a clean sweep for Trump. And it remains to be seen if that sustained attack will have some effect as we get to those big March 15th states.
And it is interesting because on the numbers side, in terms of delegates, yes, Trump is ahead, but not by an overwhelming margin.
And of course, as your viewers will know, it's not winner-take-all states between now and March 15th. It's proportionally allocated delegates. So the key thing is for those top 3 contenders, particularly number 2 and number 3, to stay in, keep pace to some degree, and then when the winner-take-all states come into play, to be able to win those states. Now, again, it's not clear that they can. Polls in the recent past have shown Trump leading in those big states like the Ohios and the Floridas and the Illinois and the North Carolinas. But again, we're only now starting to see the effects of a concerted attack by Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio against Donald Trump. And if those attacks continue to move the numbers, we could see a more dynamic situation in 2 weeks when we have those big states coming up.
Trump, of course, has been very outspoken. Do you see those attacks changing the way he communicates at all?
I don't think Trump is going to change his strategy. His strategy has been pretty successful thus far. But I do think that it may have an effect. Again, we'll have to see, but it's starting to have an effect where Cruz and Rubio criticized Trump for the effect of his business practices on workers, because of course Trump's appeal has been largely to blue-collar whites, people particularly without a college degree. And if the Rubio-Cruz attack saying that Trump said when he built Trump Tower, he hired illegal immigrants, et cetera, he didn't take care of his workers when it came to benefits, things like that. If that line of attack has an impact, maybe things will go a little differently. But again, it remains to be seen. This is really the first time that we're seeing a concerted effort on the airwaves and in campaign rallies to criticize Trump.
So, Avik, let's go to the Democratic side. Delegate-wise, of course, Hillary Clinton is much far ahead in terms of Bernie Sanders, but he had some interesting wins last night.
Yes, of course, Bernie Sanders did actually a little bit outperform the polling average. He was expected to do well in Vermont, but Oklahoma he was behind in the most recent polls in Oklahoma. So it was, I think, perhaps a feather in his cap that he succeeded in Oklahoma. But I think what's really notable out of that series of states is how overwhelming Hillary Clinton's support is in the African-American community. That was something that, of course, had been talked about quite a bit, as you know, over the last several weeks and months. But it is still remarkable. If you look at 2008 and how Hillary Clinton did very poorly among African-Americans relative to Barack Obama, her strength in that election was blue-collar whites, Trump's base. And ironically, now it's flipped, where Bernie Sanders is doing well with the blue-collar whites and the educated whites, and Hillary Clinton is doing very strong with minorities. And that's where we are. I think it's going to be very, very tough. It's hard to see a path for Bernie Sanders to win this election.
Avik, what's the most important battle next in your eyes in terms of primaries or caucuses?
Well, it's clear 15 states on the Republican side, particularly Florida and Ohio, but there's a whole set of them. I think it's very important that Marco Rubio win Florida, because if he doesn't win his home state, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. Same with John Kasich. Frankly, John Kasich doesn't have a path at all. He claims that the only reason he's staying in is to run in Ohio. He's not going to win Ohio, I don't think. And if he doesn't, then he's going to drop out. But the damage he will have done is pretty significant, because he takes votes away from the other mainstream Republican candidates. For example, in Virginia last night, Marco Rubio lost to Donald Trump by 3 points, and John Kasich's votes were arguably the margin of victory for Donald Trump. So John Kasich staying in is going to be a huge challenge for particularly Rubio, but Ohio and Florida are going to be the states to watch, because those will be the ones which really define where this race is going after that. Whether Cruz and Rubio have any shot of derailing the Trump train, or whether we're going to drag this out to the convention.
Avik Roy, opinion editor at Forbes, great to chat with you. Thanks so much. I'm Rhonda Schaffler for The Straight.